This is the Neurosurgery Podcast.
Water is for cowards. Water makes you weak. Water is for washing blood off that uniform, and you don't get blood on my uniform. That's right. Remember the Titans. We're back here again on the Neurosurgery Podcast. Delighted to be joined in this series, A Neurosurgeon at the Movies, with one of our returning champions and favorite guests, Dr. Dan Sciubba, who's picked some incredible movies to talk about today, some of his favorites from the operating room. Dr. Sciubba, for anyone who doesn't know who you are somehow, or who hasn't seen you or heard you on the show before, please take a moment and say hello to our listeners.
Hello, and thank you for having me again, JP and Mike Wong. I am Dan Sciubba from Northwell Health, spine surgeon, and a huge fan of the show.
And we're a huge fan of you. We're delighted to have you back on. We've had you on a couple times to talk about your move out to Northwell, as well as getting your MBA when Dr. Wang was working on his. But today, much more fun. We're here to talk about some of your favorite movies. And where better to start than one that you selected, Remember the Titans, which I was just telling you before we started recording today, I hadn't watched that since I was a kid. And so revisiting it to have this conversation with you, both as an adult and now as a neurosurgeon, boy, what a great pick. So tell our listeners what draws you, what motivates you, what captures your mind about this film.
Yeah, I think that of all the different types of movies that we like for all different reasons, when we think about neurosurgery and movies, I think about things that mean a lot, that things that the stakes are high, that decisions can be split-second decisions that make a difference. What other than a sports movie and of course the Matrix, where you're training to save the world. So when you're sitting there as a neurosurgeon training, I think two things come to mind with these movies. One is preparation and how important that is, because I'll tell you, I don't perform perfectly most of the time, and I definitely probably perform worse under stress. So part of it's how do you train yourself to be ready for the big moment in the game? And the second thing is courage, which is hard, which is every time you get up to bat, every time you get on the line, no matter what you did 100 times before, you still got to earn it. And so I think that is something that I always think about, even if we have a lot of air into the curve, even if we have a lot of experience, we got to get up to that at bat or to that line of scrimmage, and we got to show up every time.
Yeah. And I mean, I have this laundry list of quotes that I wrote down from this movie, but I love how you're thinking about the idea of preparation. Dr. Wang talks about this a lot, how football might be the most neurosurgical sport because every play you stop and you reset. And it's like the new operation, right? Like you have 3 cases in a day. It's not like a game of baseball or a game of soccer where you're just running back and forth and doing things willy-nilly. But each time you reset, you reform your line, and you can execute a new play. Um, One of the things that struck me most watching the Titans this time was, and perhaps as usual, I'll put on my resident hat as the trainee in the conversation, but that moment where the two leaders of the team are clashing, and he says, "That's about the worst attitude I've ever seen," and the guy replies, "Attitude reflects leadership, Captain." And I that immediately just grabbed my mind because we all go through these cycles every year as residents, at least, where you rotate around different locations that you work with. You have different team configurations. Someone's a chief at this hospital, someone's a chief at that hospital, and it changes throughout the years. It's iterative, and you can see a massive difference in the cohesion and really the culture of your team of residents year in and year out, just based on who the chief is at that time, even though the attendings remain somewhat constant. So when you're in the operating room, you're the captain of the ship, right? And so your leadership sets the tone of the whole room, sets the attitude of the whole room. How do you keep things calm, cool, collected, and focused on the task at hand? And what kind of attitude do you like having in your operating room?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd like to think I'm cool, calm, and collected, but I'm probably not as much as I think I am, or even when I do realize it, I wish I were better. I
Mm.
do think that the leadership aspect, which, as you allude to, can trickle down, is very, very important because you're always being looked at as a leader. And the best leaders that I know, they seem to always deliver. I sit there, one of the leaders that I know best, and I say, every time you have an interaction with me, I feel like you nailed it. How do you do that with everybody? And they said, it's good habits. You have to constantly be working to make sure as a leader, you're doing the right thing. Now, the second thing I'd say is I don't, even though as neurosurgeons, we consider ourselves, lone, hunters at times, as opposed to, like a tiger who's going out there and doing their case. I think the best metaphor really is probably a wolf pack. And, you don't want to be the only member of the wolf pack, like in a different movie, Hangover. I'm the one man member of the wolf pack, whatever the line is. But the thing is, you want a team. And so I think part of the leadership thing is if you can empower your teammates. I always say maybe during an operation, I'm the wide receiver. Maybe I'm the quarterback. Maybe I'm the blocker, but I can't throw and receive. I can't block and run. And so what I think part of that preparation is, and then hopefully you bring it out in the operating room, is you've elevated your team members because I'm going to make errors and I'm going to lose my focus at times and I'm not going to be totally engaged all the time. If you've surrounded yourself with good teammates, that's huge. And I would say if you gave me a compliment at the end of this career and you said Dan's a good leader or Dan's a great teammate, I might take the second one. I might take the second one because I think that's, good teammates. That's like the greatest compliment you can have. Because to your point, you said as a resident, you're changing rotations. It's one rotation. So maybe in one rotation, you are very, very quiet. The other one, you have to take the lead. The other one, you have to be a duality. The third one, you have to be a member of 10 people. And the person who can acclimate and be flexible in their learning is a great teammate. And by definition, is a great leader too, but they usually don't think of that. So I think that those two characteristics, leading and being a good teammate, are things that we should all strive to do.
Dan, you and I are about the same age, right? So it's interesting. My favorite movies are from the same era, bit of a bygone era, over a decade ago. Um, this movie's packed with all kinds of important dramatic points as well as lessons. I mean, when I first saw this movie, I was, oh my God, just finishing residency and fellowship and all that. And a lot of parts struck me. But what part of the movie was most impactful to you?
Yeah, I think for me it was that idea that, to win, to overcome, there is sacrifice. And I think the coaches sacrifice things in their own lives. They tell the players to sacrifice for each other. They have to sacrifice their commitments to their families, and only then can they overcome something that is really challenging. It's kind of like, when we're looking in, not necessarily in the operating, but when we're looking at market share and say, hey, your hospital has to do better. Well, the other people are on the line of scrimmage too. So when they say, hey, you need to improve your market share, you say, well, we're not competing against nothing. We're competing against another team. And so I think that any situation where there is competition, whether that's in a game or in life, you have to work really hard to be able to beat someone who's competing. And I think the situation is that this shows that you can't get there without sacrificing your time, your efforts. In this movie, some blood, sweat, and tears, and then you can get over the hump. And when you get over the hump, people sit there and go, "This is the most amazing thing." So I think sometimes for residency, I remember, and Mike, you said it, we were the same era. I felt an enormous amount of accomplishment getting through residency. I felt like I scaled Mount Everest and I made it to the other side because I had sacrificed time, energy, and saw people that were our age who were already, working on Wall Street we were in debt, and you sit there and say, wow, what did we do this for? We did it because we loved what we wanted to do, but only by sacrifice were we able to accomplish what we want to do. And I think I want to remind people of that in this day and age where we're often things are trying to be less painful and less stressful. That we only grow through challenge. Not, it doesn't have to be negative. It just, we don't grow unless we are challenged, and that's true in our muscles. That's true of our brain. That's true of our skills. And I want to remind people that there is that sacrifice of effort that we have to do to get to become better than what we are now.
So in this movie, and most movies are about 2 hours, right? Hour and a half, 2.5 hours. The classic 5 stages of the story that is being told, right? A fairly simple story, but it goes through this evolution. So you're talking about something between like Act 3 to Act 4, that crisis being resolved through this sacrifice. Like some people love the the finality of the movie, right? Act 5, they'll have the winning part. But you're saying it's the setup to that is what gives you the most impact, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I always say my favorite drink is the drink that I have when I'm really thirsty. And my favorite sleep or my best sleep is when I'm exhausted. And so we really do appreciate things that we've earned. We all do it, but none of us want to actually suffer through that, right? You take a long workout and you go, this hurts. And then at the end, you go, I'm so glad I did that. So I like to kind of remind that. So neurosurgery is 7 years in training. And there are multiple times that people are going, what the heck am I doing? Or this wasn't worth it, or what a bad week, or what a bad day. And you get through that with your friends, your family, your mentors, your colleagues, and you get stronger as a result. And so I think part of our job is to remind when people are going through tough times, like you have to get through this. We have to push through because there is another side to this. And then when you do that, and that person helps you, that person is gold to you, right? That's that person that you say, man, I'll take a bullet for that person. They got me through a tough time. And so I think that movie, the coach comes off as this super tough guy, and he's pounding people, and they're like, really? Do you have to be like this? And then they get stronger, and of course, Act 5 is you see the fruit of their labors.
Yeah, and I think not to ride this movie all the way into the ground, but I think a beautiful aspect of that story that we should mention, and I think we have to mention, is not just the value of the hard work and the sacrifice and the performance that it enables, but the consistency of that performance. The whole story is about how that team has to be perfect, both because that's the standards that Coach Boone sets for them, but also his job's in jeopardy if they lose one game. They dramatize it. But thinking about neurosurgery, there's a famous quote from Steve Martin: anybody can have a great night, but to be consistently good every time is much, much harder, right? And so when the new quarterback shows up halfway through their football camp, Sunshine, the California guy, he's got an arm like a cannon, but he can't do a lateral. They say, oh, you could throw it a mile, but you can't pitch it 3 yards. Any of us can have a great day by luck. And in fact, many people can do these big whack, complicated, crazy cases, but those things are very rare. Those are not common cases. Maybe with a practice like yours, Dr. Sciubba, those are your everyday cases. But thinking about spine surgery, the majority of cases that need to be done are common degenerative disease that we can elevate to a level of perfection, but it's not the giant dragon that needs to be slain. It's the more common problem out in the community. And so a good quarterback, a good leader, a good team member can't just have the cannon. He's got to be able to do the more routine plays and interact with the team as well. So how have you found over the course of your career that the sacrifices you've made, the training you put yourself through and continue to put yourself through, have translated into delivering consistent performance, not just spurts and fits of greatness?
Yeah, I think you touch on a number of things. The things that stand out most to me that I'd like to share is habits, is good habits. And not all my habits are great, but in terms of operating, I came into neurosurgery as, hey, let's do this. And I became quite compulsive. And it was not because I was naturally compulsive, it was because when I wasn't compulsive, bad things happened and I hated it. I hated it. And I said, how can this never happen again? And so when our fellows come through and our residents come through, my reputation is that I'm quite compulsive with their training. I'll sit there and say, you're dropping your shoulder and you're hitting the ball in the air. You cannot do that. And they say, well, I'll work on it. And they do it again. I say, you're not doing that maneuver for the rest of the day. Come back tomorrow ready to not do that maneuver. And I have the reputation of being, a little bit of a hard ass, if I can say that on the air here. And then when they make it through, they say, I'm actually so much better in a shorter amount of time. I don't know if they enjoyed it when they were being told that they'd been a resident for 6 or 7 years. And then I tell them, you have a bad habit here. But they say they learned quite a bit. And I think that's something, Vince Lombardi, another real football coach, not a fake one in this movie, said practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Doesn't mean we have to be perfect, but we should strive to be. And what ends up happening is my fellows, almost to an individual, end up becoming more compulsive as I am at the end of the year. They're like, are we really going to be happy with how that thing looks? I'm like, wow, I've created a monster. And usually what happens is they go through this process where they're like, I think we could have done that better. And I'm like, because we always have a debrief. Every time we're done with a case, I do a debrief and I say, let's go through the 5 steps of this procedure, the 10 steps. And I say, I didn't like what we did on this one. I thought we wasted too much time. In the beginning, the fellows always say, Dr. Sciubba, the case went great. Everything went great. Everything turned out great. I go, we spent so much time on this. And then I kind of flounder, and then I change directions. And then, and at the end of the year, they start saying things like, we could have done better. And I find myself saying, guys, we did a pretty good job. So I think we've kind of, I know that they've gone there. And then when they go out into practice, they often say, I feel like if I just stick to those 5 things that we do in this case, or the 7 steps of this case, I'm going to be safe. And so I think it's like giving your children rules. And no kid wants rules, but kids often like rules because they can at least know where the world is. They can say bedtime and dinner time. And so when you give residents and fellows a 5-step thing, you got to nail these things. Every 5, you got to nail these things. They go out in practice, go, if I stick to these 5 things, get good habits, it's going to work out. So those are things that made me think of that when you mentioned it.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting duality of movies that you chose, because the Titans, it's all about the team and working together as a team. And maybe if we could turn and talk about the Matrix, it's the story of the one, right? And obviously he was part of a family, part of a team. And anyone who knows the movie and knows the story knows that Neo would not have become the one, survived as the one, succeeded without his team. But much more so than the Titans, it is the story of a chosen one and an anointed one. So, Dr. Sciubba, what are you waiting for? You're faster than this. Don't think you are. Know you are. Come on. Stop trying to tell me and just tell me, what do you love about The Matrix?
Oh, The Matrix is an all-time great on so many levels. And I just am smiling thinking about you even talking about the quotes, because that movie it blew my mind when I saw it. It's so iconic. But let's think about it, how it relates to neurosurgery. I think the thing with neurosurgery is, which we see in training for that matter, is Neo comes in with raw talent. He doesn't have the most confidence. He doesn't have much skill. So let's go back to this. Um, when someone says, "Oh, so and so is pretty athletic," they'll pick up that sport and they struggle. Well, maybe they're athletic. Maybe they can run fast. They can jump high, but they've never held a tennis racket, and they just don't know the skill. There's a skill aspect. And so I think this is what I think of when people are going through training, is that they come in and they have some confidence, but they don't know how to hold the ball. They don't know how the game works. And you have this simultaneous tough teacher in Morpheus, named after the god of sleep, which is interesting. I could write like term papers on this movie, but Morpheus is simultaneously tough on him, as you said. What are you waiting for? Come on, man! And also constantly rooting for him. You have to believe you are the one. You have to believe this. Like, you're going to save us. To the point where Neo is insecure about it. He's like, I don't know if I got all this in me. So I just see this as this great teacher, great mentor. And so, although it's the individual, we all need that. We need someone who's going to sit there and say, "You got this, man. Oh, by the way, you suck today." And you say, "Wait, how can that be not? How can that fit in the same thing?" No, it is not attention. It is not cognitive dissonance. This is something you can have. You can have a tough teacher who loves you, and because they love you, they tell you, you duffed it today. You shanked it. And what are you doing? But you're going to win us the championship, man. Just get it straight. Just hit the ball straight. So I think this is something that when I go through it, I'll sit there and for example, we're doing a tough case, and I said, let's just stick with this. And the resident might say, I don't think I've seen this before. I don't think we can pull that off. I'm like, we're going to get this done. It's going to work. And then halfway through the case, they go, I think you're right, Dr. Sciubba. And I say, he's beginning to believe. He's beginning to believe.
So,
And
and I assume that your favorite is the first Matrix, right? The original
Yes.
one, right? Okay. So, and we, JP, we do have to make a disclaimer that we're probably going to be mostly talking about American cinema, and I'm sure the French or the Latin Americans or the Koreans may not have the same sort of history of love of these American movies, but I love them. So if you think about the Matrix writ large, the most quoted, the most cited, the most mean portion, of course, is the red pill, blue pill, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to get political, right? Because this has become a political meme. It predates the politics, right? It predates the current American grouping of what a Republican or Democrat is, right? So let's just say we're not talking about that part of red pill, blue pill, but this concept of red pill, blue pill. Maybe you can explain a little bit what it really is described as when Morpheus has the two pills, one in each hand, and also how that relates to neurosurgery. Because I mean, that is the most memorable part for most people of the movie, right?
Yeah, I think this is a great point, Mike. And the red pill, blue pill. For people who haven't seen this movie, is you know, more Neo, the main character, Keanu Reeves, knows his life is not great. He's yearning for more. The opportunity to leave that life is an alternative life that is unclear and risky, but maybe better. So you've got the classic decision that all of us have to make between the status quo, which may be safer and may be inadequate, and something better, which also has risk. And we do this every day. We do this whether we are in a relationship, do we get married, do we stay together, where we change jobs, and then obviously sometimes in the operating, do we go this way or that way? Do we cut the red wire or the blue wire? And the issue is you're basically taking on a potential better with some risk. And then so of course he says, are we going to continue down this rabbit hole down to reference to Alice in Wonderland? To are we going to go on this adventure, which may have turns and twists and pain and fear for doing this? And of course, Neo takes the red pill, right? Is that I think
Yes.
that's
Red pill. Yep.
the red pill, and obviously learns. I don't want to ruin the movie for people, but learns how his life has completely been a total sham, and how the entire world is not what it seems. I also like that Morpheus says, if you accept the Matrix, he says, "What is the Matrix?" And he says, "I can't tell you. You have to experience it for yourself." So this is this thing where we always have to sit there. I remember thinking, when I was getting married, someone said, "Why do you want to get married?" Well, I haven't been married before, so why do you want? I don't know. I saw my parents and I saw other people. I guess, why do you want to be a neurosurgeon? We ask that all the time. Well, I've never been a neurosurgeon. Well, that's a good question. So we all have to take a little leap of faith with some research that we've done on our own, kind of meld these together. And then, like I said, if you have a coach or a teacher who sits there and goes, we do this together, and I'm going to be hard on you, but if you do this with me, you're going to be better off. I mean, that's life. That's taking on challenge with someone who shares it with us and says, let's do this together. It is what we do every day. And I think we do it. I don't want to be self-centered about this as neurosurgeons, but we do it at a pretty high level. This is, as a friend of mine says, neurosurgeons aren't scooping ice cream here. This is real deal. I mean, the decisions we make impacts patients' quality of life and their ability to survive. So the stakes are high. So when you sit there and say it's risk, it's real risk. It's not. I might be home late for work. I might lose a couple dollars. And so I think that this decision is something we think about, and I don't think it's ever going to stop. And if it does stop, I think I'm going to be much less interested in life. In other words, I'm tomorrow going to have to make a decision going, do I take on risk for potential benefit? And sometimes I'll say no, I'll take the blue pill, and other times I'll take the red pill. But when we take that red pill, we want to know that there's someone there helping us.
That's a fascinating take on the red pill, blue pill. I think the conventional thought about it and the way it's spilled out into politics is more about awareness and being awoken to the reality around you. But this idea about the adventure of it and the diving into the unknown of it, I haven't heard anyone interpret that movie that way before, and I think that's a beautiful interpretation of it, especially as applied to our job. When we asked you to do this, you sent us a list of your favorite quotes from these movies, and I've been puzzling about your take on this one from The Matrix. It's the another famous iconic scene where the boy is bending the spoons with his mind, and Neo's trying to do it, and the boy tells him, "Don't try and bend it; it's impossible. Try to realize the truth." Neo says, "What truth?" The boy says that there is no spoon, and Neo says, "What?" And the kid says, "Yes." Then you'll see it's not the spoon that bends; it's only yourself. And I love these movies. I know the scene. Anyone who's seen the movie will remember that. But I read this in your email and I said, "What is Dr. Sciubba talking about? Does this mean? I mean, there is a spine, and we're not operating on ourselves. We're operating on the spine. The spine is real. Does this mean that he doesn't believe in navigation? What could this possibly mean?" And so, tell us about the spoon bending and the truth that there is no spoon in regards to neurosurgery.
Yes. So first and foremost, thank you. I'm glad that challenged you because when I first saw this movie, or maybe the fifth time I saw this movie, because I love this movie, didn't know what that meant. I was like, this kid is obviously smarter than anyone in this movie because he's bending a spoon and then he's telling Neo, it's in your mind. Just bend the spoon with your mind. And Neo's like, what the heck is going on? And I think it talks about our sense, for me, at least the way I've thought about it is, what is it? Life is perception or perception's reality. And so there's this element of people, and I do this all the time. So I think as I say this on this meeting with you folks today, I'm actually telling myself this as well, is that often, my weaknesses are the world. My weaknesses are the constraints around me. Can't do it. I don't have enough. It's not because of me. It's because, it's because so and so beat me in line, or it's unfair. They got to it first, or they know something that I don't know, or they know somebody I don't know. And the answer is, dude, it's not the spoon. It's your mind. I mean, your ability to conquer your surroundings is probably more predicated on your attitude and approach than the constraints that are even in the matrix or physical. And so basically, that kid's saying, "Hey, man, your potential is only what you constrain your potential to be." Now, in that movie, it means once he figures out this code, he can change physics. He can change the physics of the world. Don't be constrained by the fact that the spoon shouldn't be able to bend. Be creative, man. In real life, that's a little different, but I sit there and say, when people come to me and say, should I do this with my career? Because I've never seen anyone do that. Or should I do this? But I don't think I can do that because I heard you can't do it. It's too expensive. It's too much time. And the answer is, these are constraints you're putting on yourself. So not that we live that every day, that we can just be Neo, but we need to do that at some point. We need to sit by ourselves. We need to ruminate. We need to be creative and go, am I going to be happy doing this? Am I going to be, am I going to limit myself on what I do? Am I going to not try for that grant because it's hard to get that grant? Am I not going to try to create a practice that's a little bit different than the practice that my dad created, or my older brother, my older resident created? You should be thinking to take down these constraints. Now, then you come back to the real world and you gotta work in the rules. But I think that we are often limited by kind of fake constraints that we have. I look at both of you. You broke the constraint. There was no model for this before you guys started this. There was no model. So if you sat there and someone said to you, I don't think I can bend the spoon, guys, I don't know if people are going to watch. I don't know how we're going to find time for this. I don't know the logistics of this. You went, well, open your mind. And so I'm going to give you guys kudos because you bent the spoon when no one else knew that the spoon could be bent that way with your mind. So if that brought it all full circle.
Well, we ride on the coattails of our great guests, but it is interesting. You talk about the conflict between the internal and the external, and the limitations we put on ourselves. I'll put on the other hat I sometimes wear on this show, my background in psychology from before all this medicine stuff that I do now. But there's this interesting concept called the fundamental attribution bias, and it's a cognitive bias, a mistake that people make, you could say, in assigning blame. And in general, you could phrase it either way in terms of good things or bad things, but it's most it's most commonly formulated in terms of when people make mistakes. And so the attribution is whether it's to external or internal factors, and it's a bias in favor of yourself. So if I make a mistake, in my mind, I attribute that mistake or that error to external factors. I snap at my wife, or I lose my temper in the operating room. I say, oh, I didn't eat that day. I didn't sleep well the night before. I'm stressed about all these things, all these external excuses for why I behave badly. But another person, I make an internal attribution. If I see someone else snap in the OR or make a mistake, I think they're a bad person. They just have a temper. They aren't as disciplined as I am. And so it's interesting how you draw this lesson from the spoon bending scene about the internal versus the external and the barriers we make for ourselves in terms of going out and trying to pursue new things or achieve new domains. Whereas in reality, the way our human psychology actually functions, there is also this differentiation between how we view others versus ourselves and the internal versus the external influences. And so I think as we draw to a close here, perhaps as the cherry on top of this conversation, and thinking about how we let ourselves off the hook but blame others for performing the same mistakes or behaving as badly as we might ourselves, we have to remember that sometimes we must let go of pride and do what is requested of us. So as we land this X-wing fighter, Dr. Sciubba, for today, perhaps we can take a moment to indulge your love of Star Wars. I know last time you were on the show, we talked about it. We went around and tried to decide which Jedi we would all be, but talk a little bit about Star Wars, what it means to you and what it means to you in the
Well,
OR.
JP, before he answers, I just want to tell you that I'm
Oh,
so happy Dan picked these two movies because, Dan, you're a spine surgeon, right? You don't do much brain surgery anymore, right?
Right.
And both these movies have very important spine elements, right? In Remember the Titans, there's the kid that's paralyzed, right?
That's
yes.
It is central to the story. And then in the Matrix, you got to wonder who's putting in all those connect. I think it goes into cervical spine, doesn't it?
Oh,
The connection for every human. There's got to be an army of neurosurgeons in the Matrix doing
yeah.
this kind of work,
It's
even if
Ian
they're
Cahigas.
robots, right?
Yeah.
He gets is hooking us up to the Matrix. But no, I just wanted to make that comment before you talk about Star Wars. Both these movies have a very, very strong neurosurgical element buried within them.
I think
Yeah.
I think I probably could. I think you nailed it, Mike. And I think that now I think about it, there's probably a neurosurgery element in most movies if we think about it. But you nailed it. Very specific to these. The last thing on Star Wars is I often and I'm being overly romantic, but I often think neurosurgeons are Jedi warriors. I think of now that's what I always tease the residents. I say when you learn something and you become good at this, use your talents for good. Do not become a Sith Lord. Make sure that you do everything you can to help your patients. But the issue is there's similar things. There's sacrifice, there's training, there's talent, and realizing that talent, and there's doing the right thing, and there's challenge in the process. And we are often seduced by perverse incentives in our field. And you sit there and you go, man, my anger is getting the better of me, and power and money is power and all these things that drives. But come back to the natural thing of you want to do the right thing, become this talented Jedi warrior, Jedi master eventually. And so, as we go through training, I always talk to people about Padawan and master and dark side and good side and making decisions that's right. Do not get seduced by this. And so I just keep commenting that, and to the point where if you haven't seen Star Wars, it ends up becoming, and the fellows, the chiefs and the fellows, as they see the new people come in and say, you have to see Star Wars, you have to see Matrix, because Sciubba will keep making comments and you will have no idea what he's talking about. You'll say, and then I have this one line that I always say because I've spent a lot of time with orthopedic surgeons and neurosurgeons and general surgeons. So I do a lot of my surgeries that I do, and I've learned how to do some procedures that I didn't learn in residency. And one of the lines people say is, Dr. Sciubba, when did you learn how to do thoracotomies? You do your own thoracotomy. When did you learn how to do these things? And I say, not from a Jedi. And that's in the famous line to the senator when he says, can I learn how to save Padme's life? And he said, not from a Jedi. And so the point is that, on the other hand, just because we train with neurosurgeons and they are so smart and so good and they're Jedis, that you become probably the most complex self, the final form, if you learn from all different, maybe even a Sith once in a while, if you want to call a Sith, a non-neurosurgeon, but you get the point. It kind of all blurs together. But the point of the matter is, it's a training thing. Be the best you can be. Harness that talent. Do for good. Avoid the perverse incentives, and be one with the Force, kind of thing.
So, who's your favorite character?
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Obi.
Every time. He is the stud.
We have discussed this. JP, remind the audience who your spirit animal character is.
I think I went with Qui-Gon last time we talked.
Yeah.
I made a point of not looking so it would be genuine, but I think I said Qui-Gon, and that would be my answer again today. I like
Yes,
to mentor.
Qui-Gon Jinn for sure for me. I mean, Obi-Wan has the most Sith kills, right? He really does.
And you want to talk about spinal cord injuries? He cut Darth Maul in half. So there you go.
But Qui-Gon learned how to tame the midichlorians, right? And have eternal life for for Obi-Wan. He learned it from Qui-Gon Jinn. So fantastic. Well, Dan, what a wonderful and generous time you spent with us here today. Really to share your insights. We look forward to all the amazing things you're doing as you lead Northwell Neurosurgery into its new era. Thank you for listening in on the Neurosurgery podcast to our listeners, and please send us your comments through the email. JP, thank you for doing these shows. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you,
Thanks, guys.
guys. Enjoy the movies.